The wind cut through Priscilla Everly's threadbare coat like a knife through butter, but still she knelt in the dirt beside the weathered wooden cross that marked her father's grave on the outskirts of Santa Rosa, New Mexico territory. Her trembling hands folded and pressed against her forehead as she whispered desperate prayers into the December cold of 1882. She had been there since dawn, her lips moving silently, her breath forming small clouds in the frozen air. Her father had been dead 3 weeks now, taken by the fever that swept through the territory that autumn, and she had nothing left. The small ranch they had worked together was now claimed by the bank. Her mother had died giving birth to her 20 years ago, and she had no other family, no money, no prospects, and winter was closing in with teeth bared. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Please, I do not know what to do. Show me a way forward. Give me a sign, anything. I am so afraid." The cold earth bit through her worn skirt, numbing her knees. She had been praying for an hour, maybe more, her body shaking from both cold and hunger. She had not eaten properly in days, rationing the last of the dried beans and cornmeal in the house that no longer belonged to her. Tomorrow, the bank would send someone to ensure she had vacated the premises. Tonight would be her last night with a roof over her head. The sound of hoofbeats registered dimly in her consciousness, but she did not lift her head. Someone passing by, probably. Santa Rosa was a small town, but it sat along the Pecos River, and travelers came through regularly enough. She kept praying, kept begging for guidance, for help, for anything. The hoofbeats stopped. She heard the creak of leather, the soft thud of boots hitting packed earth. Still, she did not look up. Her prayer had become almost a chant now, a desperate litany of fear and hope mixed together into something raw and broken. Then she heard the footsteps approaching, slow and deliberate. They stopped beside her. For a moment there was only the wind and her ragged breathing. Then a man's voice, deep and quiet, spoke just above her. "Madam." She did not respond, did not open her eyes. One more moment, she thought. One more moment to finish this prayer, to maybe receive some sort of answer before facing whatever came next. The footsteps shifted, and then she heard the same creak of leather, closer now. Through her closed eyelids, she sensed someone near, very near. She opened her eyes and turned her head slightly. A man had knelt beside her in the dirt. He was tall, she could tell even with him kneeling, with broad shoulders beneath a heavy canvas coat. His hat was pulled low, but she could see a strong jaw shadowed with several days' worth of stubble, and eyes that were a startling shade of blue-gray, like storm clouds over the plains. He looked to be perhaps 25 or 26, weathered by sun and wind in the way of men who spent their lives outdoors. "Madam," he said again, his voice gentler this time. "I do not mean to intrude on your prayers, but you are freezing out here." "I am fine," she managed, though her teeth chattered so hard she could barely form the words. He studied her for a long moment, those storm cloud eyes taking in her threadbare coat, her worn dress, the bones visible in her wrists where her sleeves had pulled back. He looked at the simple cross marking her father's grave, at the fresh-turned earth barely beginning to settle. "Let me answer," he said quietly. She stared at him, confused. "What?" "Your prayers," he said. "I heard you asking for help, for a sign, for a way forward. Let me answer." Priscilla pulled back slightly, wariness flooding through her despite the kindness in his voice. "I do not know you, sir." "No, madam, you do not. My name is Thomas Thorne. I am a foreman at the Triple Creek Ranch about 15 miles north of here. I came into town to hire help for the winter, but also to find someone who might be interested in a different kind of position." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "The ranch owner, Mr. Samuel Garrett, is a widower with 2 young children." His wife died last spring, and he has been trying to manage both the ranch and the care of his children. He needs someone to help with the house, the cooking, and the children. Room and board provided, plus wages. She stared at him, her mind struggling to process what he was saying. You are offering me work, if you need it. And madam, forgive me for being forward, but it looks like you need it pretty desperately. Tears burned at the corners of her eyes. It was too much, too sudden, too convenient. Things like this did not happen in real life. Why? She whispered. You do not know anything about me. Why would you offer this to a stranger? Thomas shifted, settling back on his heels slightly. I came into town this morning looking to post a notice at the general store about the position. While I was there, I heard some folks talking. They mentioned Jeremiah Everly's daughter, how she had just lost her father, how the bank was taking the ranch, how she would be out on the street with nowhere to go. I asked around a bit more and everyone said the same thing. You are a good woman, a hard worker, honest and God-fearing. Your father raised you right, they said. When I saw you here, praying at this grave, I figured you must be her, must be you. Priscilla's hands trembled harder. The whole town knows my business then. Small town, madam, people talk, but they talk kindly about you, that says something. He paused. I also heard that despite your own hardship, you have been helping Mrs. Chen at the boarding house, bringing her medicine when she was sick last month, even though you could barely afford it yourself. And that you sat up with the Brennan baby when he had the croup, so his mother could get some sleep. People remember kindnesses like that. She had not realized anyone had noticed those things. She had simply done what felt right, what her father would have wanted her to do. I cannot pay you back, she said, her voice barely audible. If this is charity, I have no way to repay you. It is not charity. It is a job and an honest one. Mr. Garrett needs help and you need work. Seems like the answer to both problems. Thomas's eyes were steady on hers. No pity in them, only straightforward honesty. If you are willing, I have the wagon in town. I can take you to gather whatever belongings you have, and we can head back to the ranch today. You would have a warm place to sleep tonight instead of. He glanced at the small ranch house visible in the distance. Instead of whatever alternative you are facing. Priscilla looked down at her father's grave, at the simple cross she had carved his name into herself. What would he want her to do? Her father had been a practical man, a survivor. He would have told her to take the opportunity to accept the help, to live and to work and to make something of herself. He would not have wanted her to freeze or starve out of pride. The children, she said slowly. How old are they? Emma is 6 and Daniel is 4. Good kids, just confused and sad about losing their mother. Mr. Garrett does his best, but he is running a cattle operation and trying to be both mother and father. It is too much for one man. She took a breath. And Mr. Garrett, he is a good man, the best I have ever worked for. Fair, honest, pays on time, treats his workers with respect. He was devoted to his wife and he is devoted to those children. He just needs help. It felt like a dream, or perhaps it actually was the answer to her prayers, delivered in the most unexpected way. A cowboy, kneeling beside her in the cold, offering her a lifeline when she had been drowning. All right, she whispered. All right, yes, I will take the position. Thomas nodded, a small smile crossing his weathered face. Good, that is good. He stood and extended a hand to help her up. She took it, his hand warm and calloused and strong, and he pulled her easily to her feet. Her legs were stiff from kneeling so long in the cold, and she stumbled. His other hand shot out to steady her, catching her elbow. Easy, he said. When did you last eat, madam? Yesterday, she lied. It had actually been the day before that. His eyes narrowed, and she suspected he did not believe her. Well, first thing we will do is get some food in you. Cannot have you fainting in the wagon on the way to the ranch. He walked with her to where his horse stood, a solid bay gelding with patient eyes. He untied the reins and led the horse as they walked toward town, keeping his pace slow to match hers. Priscilla wrapped her arms around herself, trying to conserve what little warmth her body still held. "We will get your things first," Thomas said. "Then I will buy you a meal at the hotel restaurant before we head out. It is a few hours' ride to the ranch, and I would rather you had something hot in your belly before we make that trip." "You do not have to." "I know I do not have to. I want to." His tone was firm but kind. "Besides, I am hungry myself and I hate eating alone." They reached the edge of town, such as it was. Santa Rosa was small, a collection of buildings clustered near the Pecos River. The main street had a general store, a hotel with a restaurant, a saloon, a church, a blacksmith, and a handful of other businesses. Priscilla had lived on the outskirts her whole life, but she knew every building, every face. As they walked down the street, a few people stared. Mrs. Chen, standing outside her boarding house, raised a hand in a tentative wave. Priscilla waved back, feeling strange and disconnected, as if she were watching herself from a distance. Thomas stopped at the livery. "I will get the wagon hitched up. Your place is which way?" She pointed to the small house visible about half a mile past the cemetery. "That one. I will meet you there in 20 minutes. That enough time to gather what you need?" She almost laughed. Everything she owned could fit in 2 carpet bags. "Yes, that is enough time." He nodded and handed his horse off to the livery boy, then headed inside to make arrangements for a wagon. Priscilla walked back toward the little house that had been her home for her entire life, her emotions a tangle she could not begin to sort through. Inside, the house was cold. She had let the fire die that morning, seeing no point in wasting the last of the wood. It took her less than 10 minutes to pack her belongings. Clothes, most of them patched and mended more times than she could count. Her mother's Bible, the only thing she had from the woman she had never known. A small wooden horse her father had carved for her when she was a child. A daguerreotype type of her parents on their wedding day, stiff and formal in their best clothes. She stood in the main room, looking around at the place where she had grown up. Her father's chair by the fireplace. The table they had eaten at together every day. The kitchen where he had taught her to cook, to preserve food, to make do with little. So many memories, and now she was walking away from all of them. But she had no choice. The bank would not care about her memories. She heard the wagon pull up outside and took a last look around. "Goodbye, Papa," she whispered to the empty room. Then she picked up her 2 bags and walked out, closing the door behind her. Thomas was climbing down from the wagon seat when she emerged. He saw the bags and moved quickly to take them from her. "This is everything?" "Yes." He loaded them into the back of the wagon, securing them carefully. Then he helped her up onto the seat, his hand firm under her elbow. He climbed up beside her and took the reins. "Hotel?" he asked. She nodded, not trusting her voice. The hotel restaurant was warm, blessedly warm, and the smell of food made her stomach clench with hunger. Thomas led her to a table near the back and held the chair for her. She sat, feeling out of place in her worn dress among the other diners, even though most of them were just cowboys or travelers themselves. A waitress came over, a middle-aged woman named Martha whom Priscilla had known casually for years. Her eyes widened when she saw Priscilla with Thomas. "Priscilla, honey, are you all right?" "I am fine, Mrs. Martha. Mr. Thorne has offered me a position at the Triple Creek Ranch." Martha's expression shifted from concern to relief. "Oh, thank the Lord, I have been so worried about you." She turned to Thomas. "You make sure she eats properly, you hear? She has been half-starving herself trying to make what little she had last." Thomas's jaw tightened, but he just nodded. "I will make sure she is taken care of." Martha patted Priscilla's shoulder and took their order. Thomas ordered steak and potatoes for both of them, plus coffee and biscuits. When the food came, Priscilla had to force herself not to fall on it like a starving animal. She ate slowly, carefully, aware of Thomas watching her. "You can eat," he said quietly. "No one is going to take it from you." She looked up at him, embarrassed. "I am sorry. I am not usually. You do not need to apologize. You have been through a hard time. That is nothing to be ashamed of." They ate in silence for a while. The hot food was spreading warmth through her body, chasing away the cold that had settled into her bones. She felt almost human again. "Tell me about the children," she said after a while. "Emma and Daniel, what are they like?" Thomas's expression softened. "Emma is shy, very quiet since her mother died. She loved her mother deeply, and the loss hit her hard. She likes to read or have someone read to her. She has a little collection of wildflowers she presses in a book. Daniel is younger, does not understand as much about what happened. He is more energetic, always running around, asking questions. He likes horses and wants to be a cowboy when he grows up. And Mr. Garrett, Sam, is a good man. He came out here from Missouri about 10 years ago with his wife, Clara. They built the ranch from nothing, just the two of them and a handful of cattle. Now it is one of the most successful operations in the territory, but Clara's death nearly broke him. He keeps working because he has to, because he has the children and the ranch depending on him, but you can see the grief in his eyes." Priscilla nodded slowly. She understood grief. It was her constant companion these last few weeks. "What about you?" she asked. "How long have you worked for Mr. Garrett?" "About 5 years. I came out here from Texas looking for work. Sam hired me on as a regular ranch hand, but I worked my way up to foreman. He trusts me, and I do everything I can to earn that trust." "You have family?" Something flickered in Thomas's eyes, something that looked like old pain. "Had a brother. He died in the war fighting for the Confederacy. My parents passed a few years back. There is no one left now but me. I am sorry." "Life goes on," he said, but his voice had gone quiet. "You do what you have to do." They finished their meal and Thomas paid, refusing to let Priscilla even offer to contribute. Then they walked back out into the cold. The sun was past its zenith now, beginning its descent toward the horizon. They needed to get moving if they wanted to reach the ranch before dark. Thomas helped her up onto the wagon seat again, then climbed up beside her. He pulled a heavy blanket from behind the seat and draped it over her lap. "It will get colder once we are out of town and the wind picks up," he said. She nodded, tucking the blanket around herself. Thomas clicked to the horses, and the wagon lurched forward. They rolled through Santa Rosa, past the few people on the street, past the church where her father's funeral had been held, past the general store where she had bought supplies her whole life. Then they were out of town, heading north along the road that followed the Pecos River. The landscape was stark and beautiful in the winter light. The river flowed smooth and dark beside the road, and beyond it stretched the rolling plains, brown and gold and gray under the vast sky. In the distance, mountains rose in hazy purple shadows. "It is beautiful," Priscilla said softly, surprising herself. Thomas glanced at her, then back at the road. "It is. Hard country but beautiful. I have always thought so." They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of the wagon, the steady clop of the horses' hooves, and the whisper of the wind. Priscilla found herself stealing glances at Thomas. He sat relaxed but alert, his hands easy on the reins, his eyes constantly scanning the road ahead and the land around them. There was a competence to him, a quiet confidence that made her feel safe. "May I ask you something?" she said after a while. "Of course." "Why did you kneel beside me?" "When I was praying, I mean. You could have just stood there and waited or called out to me from a distance. but you knelt down in the cold dirt beside me. Why?" Thomas was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "My mother used to say that when someone is down on their knees, you should not stand over them like you are better. You get down on their level, meet them where they are. It is a matter of respect." He paused. "And I suppose I was praying a little myself." "Praying for what?" "That I would find the right person for this job. That I would not make a mistake. Sam is counting on me, and those children, they need someone who will care for them properly, not just go through the motions for the wages." He looked at her. "When I saw you there, heard what you were saying, I knew you were the right person." "How could you know that?" "Someone who prays that desperately, that honestly, is someone who has faith even when everything has fallen apart. That is the kind of person those children need. Someone who will not give up on them even when things are hard." His words settled into her heart, warming something that had felt frozen for weeks. "I will do my best for them," she said. "I promise you that. I believe you." The miles rolled by slowly. The sun sank lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. The temperature dropped further, and Priscilla huddled deeper into the blanket. Thomas shrugged out of his heavy coat and draped it over her shoulders on top of the blanket. "You will freeze," she protested. "I am fine. I am used to the cold." His voice left no room for argument. The coat was warm from his body heat and smelled of leather and wood smoke and something else, something that was just him. She pulled it tighter around herself, grateful beyond words. As the light faded, Thomas pointed ahead. "There. See that cluster of buildings? That is the Triple Creek Ranch." Priscilla squinted into the gathering dusk. She could make out several structures, a large house, a barn, a bunkhouse, corrals, and various outbuildings. Smoke rose from the chimney of the main house, and lamplight glowed in the windows. "It is bigger than I expected," she said. "Sam has worked hard. He runs about 300 head of cattle, employs 6 men full-time, plus extra hands during roundup and branding season. It is a real operation." As they drew closer, a man emerged from the barn, his form silhouetted against the lamplight spilling from the open door. He was tall and broad-shouldered, and even from a distance, Priscilla could see the weariness in the way he moved. Thomas pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the main house. "Sam," he called out. The man walked over, and as he came into the light, Priscilla could see he was perhaps 30 years old, with dark hair and a strong, weathered face. His eyes were dark brown, and there was a deep sadness in them that reminded her of looking in a mirror these past weeks. "Thomas," he said, his voice a low rumble, "did you find someone?" "I did." Thomas climbed down from the wagon, then helped Priscilla down. "Sam, this is Miss Priscilla Everly. Miss Everly, this is Samuel Garrett, the owner of the Triple Creek Ranch." Samuel looked at her, taking in her worn dress and thin frame. "Miss Everly," he said, nodding politely. "Thomas told you about the position." "Yes, sir." "And you are willing to take it on. It is not easy work. 2 young children, a household to manage, cooking for the ranch hands at times. It can be demanding." "I am not afraid of hard work, Mr. Garrett, and I love children. I will do my very best for your family." Something in his expression eased slightly. "Then welcome to the Triple Creek. Let me show you to your room, and you can meet Emma and Daniel in the morning. They are already asleep for the night." He led the way into the house, Thomas following with Priscilla's bags. The interior was warm and comfortable, if slightly untidy. The main room had a large fireplace with a fire crackling away, comfortable furniture, and signs of children everywhere. A rag doll on a chair, wooden blocks scattered near the hearth, a child's drawing tack to the wall. "Your room is here," Samuel said, leading her to a door off the main room. "It used to be Clara's sewing room, but we converted it. It is not large, but it has a bed, a dresser, and a window. I hope it will suit." Priscilla looked into the room. It was small, as he had said, but it was clean and warm, with a real bed covered in quilts and a cheerful rag rug on the floor. Compared to what she had been facing just hours ago, it looked like paradise. "It is perfect," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, Mr. Garrett," he nodded. "You must be exhausted. Get some rest and we will talk more in the morning. Thomas, can you stay for a bit?" "I need to discuss the supply order with you." "Of course." Samuel disappeared deeper into the house, and Thomas set Priscilla's bags down inside the small room. He looked at her, his storm cloud eyes serious. "You are going to be all right here," he said. "I know it is all new and probably overwhelming, but Sam is a good man and the children need you. You will find your place." "Thank you," Priscilla said, "for everything. For stopping, for listening, for bringing me here. I do not know what would have happened to me if you had not come along when you did. I think you would have figured something out. You are stronger than you know." He smiled, a real smile that lit up his face and made him look younger. "But I am glad I was there. Good night, Miss Everly." "Good night, Mr. Thorne, and please call me Priscilla." "Only if you call me Thomas," she smiled back. "All right, Thomas." He left, closing the door softly behind him. Priscilla stood alone in the small room, listening to the low murmur of voices from the other room as Thomas and Samuel discussed ranch business. She unpacked her few belongings, placing her mother's Bible on the small table beside the bed, setting the daguerreotype of her parents on the dresser. Then she sat on the bed, the quilts soft beneath her, and felt the tears come at last. Not tears of despair this time, but tears of relief, of gratitude, of overwhelming emotion. This morning, she had been kneeling in the frozen dirt, praying desperately for help with no idea where it would come from. Tonight, she had a warm bed, a roof over her head, and a purpose. And she had met Thomas Thorne, a cowboy who had knelt beside her in her darkest moment and offered her a lifeline. She fell asleep that night with prayers of thanksgiving on her lips. The next morning, Priscilla woke to pale sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of children's voices. She sat up quickly, disoriented for a moment before remembering where she was. The Triple Creek Ranch. Her new home, at least for now. She dressed quickly in her least worn dress, a faded blue calico, and brushed and pinned her dark hair. When she opened her door, she found the main room empty, though the fire had been built up and was crackling cheerfully. The children's voices were coming from outside. She went to the window and looked out. In the yard, two small figures were bundled up in coats and scarves. The girl, Emma, was building something in the dirt with sticks, her movements careful and precise. The boy, Daniel, was running in circles, his arms spread wide, making whooshing sounds. Samuel stood near the barn, talking with one of the ranch hands. Taking a breath, Priscilla walked to the front door and stepped outside. The cold air hit her face, but the sun was bright, and it was not as bitter as yesterday had been. Daniel spotted her first. "Papa, there is a lady." Samuel turned, and when he saw Priscilla, he walked over, the children trailing behind him. "Good morning, Miss Everly. I hope you slept well." "Very well, thank you. Children, come here. I want you to meet someone." He put a hand on each child's shoulder. "This is Miss Priscilla Everly. She's going to be staying with us and helping to take care of you. Miss Everly, this is my daughter, Emma, and my son, Daniel." Emma was a pretty child with dark hair like her father and large, solemn brown eyes. She studied Priscilla carefully, then gave a small curtsy. "Hello, Miss Everly." "Hello, Emma. It is very nice to meet you." Daniel was less reserved. "Are you going to live here now?" "I am, yes." "Are you going to cook?" "Mrs. Henderson from town has been cooking, but Papa says her biscuits are like rocks." "Daniel," Samuel said, his tone reproachful but with a hint of amusement. "That is not polite." "But you said—" What I say in private and what we say in front of guests are different things. Priscilla laughed. I promise to do my best to make biscuits that are not like rocks. Daniel grinned. Good, I am hungry. Then let us go inside and I will make breakfast, Priscilla said. The morning passed in a flurry of activity. Priscilla explored the kitchen, taking stock of what supplies were available. The pantry was well stocked with basics: flour, cornmeal, beans, salt pork, dried fruit, and various preserves. She found eggs in the cold cellar and fresh milk in a crock. She set about making a proper breakfast: biscuits, eggs, bacon, and gravy. Emma watched her work, silent but attentive. Daniel wandered in and out, asking questions about everything. Why do you put butter in the biscuits? To make them tender and flaky. What is flaky? It means they have layers like a pastry. What is a pastry? Daniel, let Miss Everly work, Samuel said from the doorway. He had come in quietly and was leaning against the frame, watching. It is all right, Priscilla said. I do not mind questions. When breakfast was ready, they sat at the large kitchen table together. Samuel said grace, and then they ate. Daniel devoured his food with enthusiasm, and even Emma ate well, though she remained quiet. Samuel ate slowly, but Priscilla saw him take a second biscuit and then a third. These are very good, he said. Thank you, Miss Everly. You are welcome. I am glad you like them. After breakfast, Samuel excused himself to return to work, leaving Priscilla with the children. She spent the morning getting to know them, cleaning the house and preparing lunch. Emma slowly began to warm to her, showing her the pressed wildflower collection Thomas had mentioned. Daniel never stopped talking, telling her about the horses, the cattle, and his favorite ranch hand, a man named Pedro who was teaching him to rope. At midday, Thomas rode in from wherever he had been working. Priscilla was hanging laundry when she saw him dismount near the barn. He spotted her and raised a hand in greeting. She waved back, feeling an unexpected flutter in her chest. Later that afternoon, after the children had gone outside to play under Samuel's watchful eye, Thomas came to the house. Priscilla was in the kitchen, starting preparations for supper. Knock, knock, he said from the doorway. She turned, wiping her hands on her apron. Hello, Thomas, come in. He stepped inside, removing his hat. I wanted to check on you, make sure you settled in all right. I am doing well. The children are sweet and Mr. Garrett has been very kind. Good. I am glad. He hesitated, then said, I was wondering if you might need anything from town. I am planning to ride in tomorrow for supplies and I could pick up anything you need. That is very thoughtful. Let me check the pantry and make a list. They walked to the pantry together, Priscilla taking inventory while Thomas stood nearby. She was very aware of his presence, of how he filled the space, of the way his eyes followed her movements. I think we need more sugar and coffee and some dried apples if they have them, she said, writing on a scrap of paper. And perhaps some penny candy for the children if that is all right. I am sure Sam would not mind. Those kids could use a little sweetness in their lives. She handed him the list and their fingers brushed. It was brief, barely a touch, but it sent a jolt through her that she was not expecting. From the way Thomas's eyes widened slightly, she thought he might have felt it too. Well, he said, his voice a bit rougher than usual. I should get back to work. Of course. Thank you again, Thomas, for everything. He nodded and left, and Priscilla stood in the kitchen, her heart beating faster than it should be. The days settled into a routine. Priscilla rose early each morning, made breakfast for the family, cared for the children, cleaned the house, and prepared meals. Emma gradually became more talkative, telling Priscilla about her mother, showing her special places around the ranch. Daniel appointed himself Priscilla's helper and followed her everywhere, chattering constantly. Samuel was courteous and kind, clearly grateful for her help. He spent long days working the ranch, often coming in after dark, exhausted and weathered. Priscilla made sure there was always a hot meal waiting for him, and slowly, she saw some of the deep weariness begin to lift from his shoulders. And then there was Thomas. He came by the house often, sometimes on ranch business, sometimes just to check on her and the children. He taught Daniel to whittle, showed Emma how to identify different bird calls, and talked with Priscilla about everything and nothing. The weather, the ranch, their pasts, their hopes. Priscilla found herself looking forward to his visits more than she should. There was something about him that drew her, something steady and genuine. He never made her feel like a burden or a charity case. He treated her with respect and, increasingly, with warmth. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after her arrival, Thomas found her in the yard trying to repair a broken fence rail while the children played nearby. She was struggling with the heavy wood, her hands cold and clumsy. "Here, let me," Thomas said, appearing beside her. He took the rail from her hands and positioned it easily, then hammered it into place with smooth, efficient strikes. "I could have done that," Priscilla said, a bit defensively. "I know you could have, but why struggle when I am right here?" He grinned at her, and she found herself smiling back despite her irritation. "You always seem to appear right when I need help. Maybe I am paying attention." Something in the way he said it made her breath catch. She looked up at him, and his eyes were on her, warm and intent. "Miss Everly," Emma called from across the yard. "Look at the bird I found." The moment broke, and Priscilla turned away, her cheeks flushed. "I should go see." "Priscilla," Thomas said softly. She stopped but did not turn back. "I am glad you are here." "I am glad too," she whispered, then walked away to join the children. That night, lying in her bed, Priscilla stared at the ceiling and tried to sort through her feelings. She had been at the ranch less than a month, and already she felt more at home here than she had ever felt anywhere except with her father. The children had claimed a piece of her heart. Samuel had become a kind employer and friend. And Thomas had become something she had not expected and was not sure she was ready for. She was attracted to him. There was no denying it. But more than that, she liked him. She liked his steadiness, his humor, his kindness. She liked the way he was gentle with the children, the way he treated everyone with respect, the way he worked hard without complaint. She liked the sound of his voice and the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. But she had nothing to offer him. She was a penniless woman living on the charity of his employer. What could she possibly bring to a relationship? What if he did not feel the same way, and her feelings made things awkward? She could not afford to lose this position, not when she finally had a home again. No, it was better to keep her feelings to herself. Better to focus on the children, on her work, on building a stable life. Romance was a luxury she could not afford. She resolved to be more careful around Thomas, to maintain proper distance. It would be better for everyone. Her resolution lasted exactly 2 days. It was late December now, and snow had begun to fall in earnest. The ranch was blanketed in white, and the temperature had dropped so low that ice formed on the inside of the windows. Priscilla kept the fires burning constantly, and made sure the children were bundled up warmly. Samuel and the ranch hands were working around the clock to make sure the cattle had access to water and were not freezing in the exposed areas. Thomas came in late one evening, so cold he could barely move his fingers. Priscilla sat him down near the fire and brought him coffee laced with whiskey to warm him from the inside. "Drink," she ordered. He did not argue, too cold to protest. He wrapped his hands around the mug and drank slowly, his face gradually regaining some color. "The cattle?" she asked, sitting down nearby. "We got them moved to the sheltered canyon. They should be all right there. But this storm is bad, Priscilla. worse than I have seen in years." As if to emphasize his words, the wind howled around the house, rattling the windows. "Are you all right?" she asked. "No frostbite, I am fine, just cold." He looked at her, his eyes tired but warm. "Thank you for waiting up. I wanted to make sure everyone made it back safe." "Sam is bedding down in the barn with Pedro and the others. They will stay with the horses tonight in case anything happens. I was going to go back out, but Sam ordered me to stay in the house, keep an eye on you and the children. We are fine. I know, but humor me." They sat together in companionable silence, the fire crackling between them. Priscilla should have gone to bed, should have left him to warm up alone, but she found she did not want to leave. There was something peaceful about sitting here with him, something right. "Priscilla," Thomas said after a while, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "You ever regret coming here? I know it all happened so fast and you did not have much choice. You ever wish things had been different?" She thought about it carefully. "I regret losing my father. I will always regret that. But coming here? No, I do not regret that. The children have brought joy back into my life. Mr. Garrett has given me a home, and you." She stopped, realizing she was about to say too much. "And me," he prompted gently. She looked at him, at his honest face and warm eyes, and something in her heart gave way. "And you have given me hope." The air between them seemed to thicken. Thomas set down his mug and leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his eyes never leaving hers. "Priscilla, I need to tell you something." Her heart started to pound. "What?" "I have been thinking about you since the day I found you praying by your father's grave. You have been in my thoughts every day, every moment. I know it is too soon, I know I should not feel this way, but I cannot help it. You are." He stopped, searching for words. "You are everything good and strong and beautiful. You make me want to be a better man, and I am falling in love with you." The world seemed to stop. Priscilla stared at him, her breath caught in her throat. "Thomas, you do not have to say anything," he said quickly. "I know this is not what you came here for, and I do not want to make you uncomfortable. I just needed you to know. I needed to be honest." "You think I have not been thinking about you too?" The words burst out of her before she could stop them. "You think I have not been fighting my feelings every single day? Thomas, you saved me. You knelt beside me when I was at my lowest point, and you gave me a reason to keep going. How could I not fall in love with you?" The joy that spread across his face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "You love me." "I think I started loving you the moment you said, 'Let me answer,'" she whispered. He stood and crossed the small space between them, kneeling in front of her chair just as he had knelt beside her in the cold dirt all those weeks ago. He took her hands in his calloused palms warm against hers. "Priscilla Everly, I know we have not known each other long. I know we should probably wait, take our time, do this properly. But life is short and uncertain, and I have learned not to waste time when something is right. I want to build a life with you. I want to wake up beside you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to give you everything you deserve, everything you have been denied. Will you marry me?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Yes," she breathed. "Yes, Thomas, I will marry you." He pulled her down off the chair and into his arms, and then he was kissing her, and she was kissing him back, and it was perfect. His lips were warm and gentle and sure, and she felt like she was coming home. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Thomas rested his forehead against hers. "I do not have a ring to give you yet. I will get you one, I promise, but I do not need a ring. I just need you." They sat together on the floor in front of the fire, wrapped in each other's arms, making plans in whispered voices. They would tell Samuel in the morning, ask for his blessing. They would marry in the little church in Santa Rosa as soon as the weather cleared. It would be a simple wedding, but it would be theirs. "Where will we live?" Priscilla asked. "Do you have a house?" I have been saving my wages, and I own a piece of land about 5 miles from here. I was planning to build a house on it eventually. It is good land with water and shelter. We could build our home there, start a small herd of our own. Sam has already told me I can take some cattle as payment for my work. It would not be much at first, but we could grow it together. It sounds perfect. They stayed there until the early hours of the morning, talking and dreaming and stealing kisses. Finally, Thomas insisted she get some sleep. He walked her to her door, kissed her one more time, and then went to make a bed for himself on the floor near the fire. Priscilla lay in her bed, too happy to sleep. Her life had changed so completely in such a short time. From despair to hope, from loneliness to love. It felt like a miracle. In the morning, she woke to the sound of laughter. She got up and opened her door to find Thomas playing with the children, chasing them around the main room while they shrieked with delight. He saw her and grinned, and her heart swelled with love. Samuel came in from the barn, stamping snow off his boots. Storm broke during the night. We should be able to get the cattle checked today. He paused, looking between Thomas and Priscilla, and his eyebrows rose. Is there something I should know? Thomas straightened, suddenly serious. He walked over to Priscilla and took her hand, lacing their fingers together. Sam, I have asked Miss Everly to marry me, and she has accepted. I am asking for your blessing and understanding. I know she was hired to help with the children, and I will understand if you need to make other arrangements. But Samuel held up a hand, stopping him. A slow smile spread across his face. Other arrangements? Thomas, this is wonderful news. I have been watching the two of you dance around each other for weeks. I was beginning to wonder if I was going to have to lock you in a room together. Priscilla felt her cheeks flush. You knew. I am not blind. The way you two look at each other, it was only a matter of time. His expression turned earnest. Thomas, you are like a brother to me. You have been loyal and true since the day I met you, and Miss Everly, you have brought life back to this house. The children adore you, and I have seen you work yourself to the bone to care for them. If you two have found happiness together, then I am thrilled for you both. Emma tugged on Samuel's coat. Papa, what does marry mean? It means Mr. Thomas and Miss Priscilla are going to be husband and wife, like you and Mama were. Emma's voice was small. Yes, sweetheart, just like that. Emma looked at Priscilla, her big eyes serious. Does that mean you will go away? Priscilla knelt down to Emma's level. I will move to a different house with Thomas, but we will not be far away, and you can visit us anytime you want. I promise I am not leaving you, Emma. You will always be special to me. Emma thought about this, then nodded slowly. Okay, I like Mr. Thomas. He is nice. Daniel, not to be left out, announced. I am going to be a cowboy when I grow up and get married too. Everyone laughed, and the tension broke. Samuel insisted on opening a bottle of wine he had been saving, and they toasted the engagement. The rest of the day was celebratory, despite the cold and the snow and the hard work that still needed to be done. Over the next few weeks, preparations moved forward. Thomas spent every spare moment working on building a house on his land. Samuel gave him time off from ranch duties to focus on it, and several of the other ranch hands volunteered their help. By early February, there was a small but sturdy cabin standing on Thomas's property, with a fireplace, a real glass window, and a loft for sleeping. Priscilla continued to care for the children, but she also spent time preparing for her new life. She sewed new curtains for the cabin windows, made quilts, and preserved food to stock their pantry. The women in town, when they heard about the engagement, were generous with gifts and advice. Even Mrs. Chen, who was elderly and not well off herself, gave Priscilla a beautiful embroidered pillowcase. The wedding was set for the first week of March, when the worst of the winter would be past. Priscilla had no wedding dress, but the women of the town banded together and made her one, a simple but beautiful gown of cream-colored muslin with lace at the collar and cuffs. Thomas bought her a ring, a simple gold band, and when he slipped it on her finger to check the fit, she cried. "It is too much," she protested. "It is not nearly enough, but it is a start." The night before the wedding, Priscilla lay in her bed at the ranch for the last time. Tomorrow she would become Mrs. Thomas Thorne. Tomorrow her new life would truly begin. There was a soft knock on her door. "Come in," she called. Emma slipped inside, wearing her nightgown, her feet bare. "Miss Priscilla, I cannot sleep." "Come here, sweetheart." Priscilla pulled back the covers and Emma climbed in beside her. They lay together in the darkness and Emma said quietly, "I miss my mama." "I know you do, honey. That is all right. You should miss her. She was your mama and she loved you very much." "Do you think she would be sad that you are marrying Mr. Thomas?" "No, Emma. I think she would be happy that your papa has help and that you and Daniel have someone who cares for you. Love does not run out. Me loving Thomas does not mean I love you any less. Do you understand?" "I think so." Emma was quiet for a moment. "I am glad you are marrying Mr. Thomas. You make him smile, and you make Papa smile too. We were all sad for a long time, but you made things better." Priscilla hugged the little girl close. "You made things better for me too, Emma. You and Daniel and your papa and Thomas, you all saved me. I will never forget that." They fell asleep like that, curled together, and when Priscilla woke in the morning, Emma was still there, her small hand clutched in Priscilla's. The wedding day dawned clear and bright, the sky a brilliant blue. Priscilla dressed with the help of Mrs. Chen and Martha from the hotel restaurant, both of whom had insisted on being there. Her hair was arranged with sprigs of dried lavender, and the cream-colored dress fit perfectly. The ceremony was held in the small church in Santa Rosa. The whole town seemed to turn out, cramming into the pews. Samuel walked Priscilla down the aisle, and when Thomas saw her, the look on his face made her want to cry and laugh at the same time. The preacher kept the ceremony simple and heartfelt. When it came time for the vows, Thomas's voice was strong and clear. "I, Thomas Thorne, take you, Priscilla Everly, to be my wife. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you for all the days of my life. I promise to work hard to provide for you, to protect you, to stand by your side in good times and bad. You are my answer to prayer, and I will spend the rest of my life making sure you know how much you are loved." Priscilla's voice shook with emotion as she spoke her own vows. "I, Priscilla Everly, take you, Thomas Thorne, to be my husband. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you for all the days of my life. I promise to build a home with you, to stand by your side, to be your partner in all things. You knelt beside me when I had nothing, and you offered me everything. I will never forget that gift, and I will spend the rest of my life loving you with all my heart." When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Thomas kissed her with such tenderness and joy that applause broke out in the church. The reception was held at the hotel, with food and music and dancing. Priscilla danced with Thomas, with Samuel, with several of the ranch hands, and even with little Daniel, who stood on her feet while she guided him around the floor. Emma watched from the sidelines, clapping and laughing. As the sun began to set, Thomas and Priscilla said their goodbyes and climbed into the wagon to head to their new home. The entire town stood outside the hotel, waving and calling good wishes. The cabin was warm when they arrived, someone having come ahead to light the fire. It was small and simple, but it was theirs. Thomas carried Priscilla over the threshold, both of them laughing, and set her down gently. "Welcome home, Mrs. Thorne," he said. "Welcome home, Mr. Thorne," she replied. That night, they lay together in the loft, wrapped in each other's arms, and Priscilla thought back to that cold December day when she had been kneeling in the dirt, praying for help. She had been so lost, so afraid, and then Thomas had appeared like an answer to those prayers. "What are you thinking about?" Thomas asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "I am thinking about how strange life is, how a single moment can change everything. If you had not come along that day, if you had not stopped, if you had not knelt beside me. But I did. And I will always be grateful that I did. I love you, Thomas Thorne. I love you, Priscilla Thorne." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in warmth and love and hope for the future. The first year of marriage was hard work but filled with joy. Thomas and Priscilla worked side by side to build their ranch. They started with the small herd Samuel had given them, about 20 head of cattle, and added to it slowly. Thomas continued to work as foreman for the Triple Creek, and Priscilla took in sewing and helped with the children when Samuel needed her. Their cabin was small but comfortable. Priscilla made it a home with curtains and quilts and small touches that made it warm and welcoming. Thomas built her a garden plot and promised that, come spring, she could plant whatever she wanted. They visited Samuel and the children often, and Emma and Daniel frequently came to spend the night at the cabin, sleeping in makeshift beds near the fire while Priscilla told them stories and Thomas carved them small toys. In late autumn, Priscilla began to suspect she might be pregnant. She waited, wanting to be sure before she said anything. When she was certain, she told Thomas one evening after supper. He had been sitting by the fire cleaning his rifle. She came and knelt beside him, just as he had knelt beside her that day in the cold. "Thomas," she said softly, "I have something to tell you." He looked at her, concern flickering in his eyes. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I am more than all right. I am going to have a baby." The rifle slipped from his hands, forgotten. "A baby? Priscilla, are you sure?" "I am sure." He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "A baby," he whispered. "We are going to have a baby." They told Samuel and the children the next Sunday when they came for dinner. Emma immediately wanted to know if it would be a girl so she could help take care of her. Daniel wanted to know if the baby could ride horses. Samuel smiled and shook Thomas's hand, his eyes warm with happiness for them. The pregnancy was not easy. Priscilla was sick for the first few months, barely able to keep anything down. Thomas was beside himself with worry, hovering over her constantly until she threatened to lock him in the barn. But as the months passed, she began to feel better, and the baby grew strong within her. In May, as the wildflowers bloomed across the plains and the cattle grazed contentedly in the new grass, Priscilla's time came. Thomas rode hard to fetch the midwife from town, and Samuel came to wait with him while the women worked. The birth was long and difficult. Thomas paced outside the cabin, nearly wearing a path in the dirt. Samuel tried to calm him, but it was useless. Finally, as the sun was setting, a baby's cry rang out. Thomas froze, his heart in his throat. A moment later, the door opened and the midwife looked out. "You have a son, Mr. Thorne, a strong, healthy boy, and your wife is tired but well." Thomas nearly knocked the midwife over in his haste to get inside. Priscilla was propped up in their bed, pale and exhausted but smiling. In her arms was a tiny bundle, a baby with a shock of dark hair and lungs that clearly worked just fine. "Thomas," she said softly, "come meet your son." He knelt beside the bed, tears streaming down his face as he looked at the baby. "He is perfect. You are perfect. I love you so much, Priscilla." "I love you too." They named the baby Jacob, after Thomas's father. Jacob Thorne was the first of many children to be born in that little cabin. Over the years, Priscilla and Thomas had 4 more children. Another son, Benjamin, and then twin girls, Ruth and Grace, and finally another son, Samuel, named after the man who had given them both so much. The ranch grew slowly but steadily. Thomas had a gift for working with cattle, and the herd thrived under his care. Priscilla managed the household, raised the children, and kept the books. Together, they built something lasting and good. Emma and Daniel remained close to them as they grew. Emma became like a big sister to the Thorne children, helping care for them and telling them stories. When Emma was 18, she married a young rancher from a neighboring property, and Priscilla stood beside her as she had once promised, never having left her. Daniel grew up to be a cowboy, just as he had always wanted. He worked for his father for a few years, then hired on with Thomas, becoming one of the best ranch hands in the territory. Samuel eventually remarried, a kind widow from town who loved his children and helped him heal from Clara's death. He remained one of Thomas and Priscilla's closest friends, and their families were intertwined in all the important ways. The years passed in a rhythm of work and love, hardship and joy. There were droughts and harsh winters, illnesses and losses. But through it all, Thomas and Priscilla faced everything together, their love only deepening with time. One evening, many years later, they sat together on the porch of their much-expanded house, watching the sun set over the land they had built together. Their children were grown now, some still living nearby, others making their own way in the world. Grandchildren ran and played in the yard, their laughter carrying on the wind. Priscilla's hair was streaked with silver now, and Thomas's face was deeply lined by years of sun and weather. But when he looked at her, his eyes held the same love they had on that cold December day when he had knelt beside her in her darkest hour. "Do you ever think about that day?" Priscilla asked, seeming to read his thoughts. "The day we met, every day of my life. I thank God for leading me to you. I was praying for help, for a sign, for anything, and then there you were." Thomas took her hand, his thumb rubbing across the simple gold band she still wore. "Let me answer," he said softly, echoing the words he had spoken so long ago. "I think I knew even then that you were my destiny, that I had been searching for you my whole life without knowing it. We have built a good life, Thomas, the best life, because we built it together." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and red and purple. The land stretched out before them, the ranch they had created through hard work and love, the home they had made for their family. Priscilla thought back to that desperate girl, kneeling in the frozen dirt beside her father's grave, certain she had nothing left to live for. She thought about the cowboy who had knelt beside her and offered her hope when she had none. She thought about the journey they had taken together, from strangers to partners to lovers to the parents and grandparents of a whole new generation. "I would do it all again," she said. "Every hard moment, every struggle, every fear. I would do it all again to end up right here, right now with you." Thomas lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "As would I, my love, as would I." As darkness fell, and the stars began to appear in the vast New Mexico sky, Thomas and Priscilla Thorne sat together, hand in hand, surrounded by the evidence of a life well lived and a love that had endured. The cold desperation of that December day had transformed into a warmth that would last forever, a warmth built on faith, hope, and the simple kindness of a cowboy who had knelt beside a praying woman and offered to answer her prayers. Their grandchildren eventually came running up to the porch, begging for stories before bed. Thomas and Priscilla looked at each other and smiled. They had so many stories to tell, stories of hard work and perseverance, of faith and love, of a life built together from nothing. But the story they loved telling most was the one about how they met. How Priscilla had been praying alone in the cold, desperate and afraid, and how Thomas had knelt beside her and said those 3 words that had changed both their lives forever. "Let me answer." And he had answered not just her prayers, but needs she had not even known she had. He had given her love, security, a home, and a family. He had given her a reason to believe in miracles again. The children settled at their feet, and Priscilla began the story, her voice warm and sure, Thomas's hand still holding hers. Outside, the ranch settled into the quiet of night, the cattle bedded down, the horses content in their stalls, the land resting under the blanket of stars. It was a good life, a beautiful life, built on the foundation of that one moment when 2 lost souls had found each other and chosen to build something lasting. The legacy of that choice surrounded them now in the faces of their children and grandchildren, in the ranch that bore their name, in the love that had only grown stronger with every passing year. As the story ended and the children were finally herded off to bed by their parents, Thomas and Priscilla remained on the porch a while longer, reluctant to end the perfect evening. The night air was cool but not cold, carrying the scent of sage and grass and the promise of spring. "We have been truly blessed," Priscilla said quietly. "We have," Thomas agreed. "More than I ever dreamed possible." They finally went inside, banked the fire, and climbed the stairs to their bedroom. As they lay together in the darkness, wrapped in each other's arms as they had been for so many years, Priscilla sent up a silent prayer of thanksgiving. For Thomas, for their children, for the life they had built, and for that cold December day when a desperate prayer had been answered by a kind cowboy with a generous heart. She fell asleep smiling, Thomas's steady heartbeat beneath her cheek, knowing that whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together. They always had and they always would until the end of their days. And when that end finally came, many peaceful years later, they went together as they had lived, hand in hand. The ranch passed to their children, who worked it with the same dedication and love their parents had shown. The story of Thomas and Priscilla became family legend, told and retold through generations. The small cabin where they had started their life together still stood, preserved by their descendants as a reminder of humble beginnings and the power of faith and love. The land they had nurtured continued to flourish, a living testament to their hard work and devotion. And in the little cemetery in Santa Rosa, beside the grave of Jeremiah Everly where this story had begun, 2 new graves appeared side by side. The headstones were simple but beautiful, bearing the names Thomas Thorne and Priscilla Thorne, beloved husband and wife, parents and grandparents, ranchers and partners. Between the names was carved a single phrase, the words that had started everything, the words that had changed 2 lives and created a legacy that would endure for generations. Let me answer. The story of Priscilla and Thomas became more than just family history. It became a reminder that even in the darkest moments, when all seems lost, hope can appear in unexpected forms. That prayers are sometimes answered not by grand miracles, but by simple human kindness. That love can flourish even in the hardest soil if it is tended with care and devotion. Years turned into decades, and the Thorne family continued to grow and prosper. Each generation added their own stories to the family legacy, but the story of how it all began remained the favorite. Children grew up hearing about their great-great-grandmother who had prayed in the cold and their great-great-grandfather who had knelt beside her. They learned about faith and love, about perseverance and partnership, about building something lasting with your own 2 hands. The ranch itself became known throughout the territory, not just for the quality of its cattle but for the character of the family that ran it. The Thornes had a reputation for fairness, for helping neighbors in need, for treating everyone with respect and dignity. It was a reputation that started with Thomas and Priscilla and was carefully maintained by every generation that followed. The cabin that had been their first home was eventually converted into a sort of shrine, kept exactly as it had been when they had lived there. The loft where they had slept, the fireplace where Thomas had sat when Priscilla told him about their first baby, the kitchen table where they had shared countless meals, all preserved as a reminder of where the family had started. On special occasions, family members would gather there, sitting in that small space that had once held such big dreams. They would tell the stories, sing the old songs, and remember the couple who had built everything from nothing. The legacy extended beyond just the family. The Thorne Ranch became known as a place where down-on-their-luck drifters could find honest work and a fair wage. Young people starting out were given opportunities to learn and grow. Widows and orphans were quietly helped, though the family never sought recognition for their charity. It was simply what Thomas and Priscilla had taught by example. When you have been shown kindness in your darkest hour, you pass that kindness forward. When someone has knelt beside you in your despair, you kneel beside others in theirs. The Triple Creek Ranch, where Priscilla had first found refuge and where the love story had begun, remained closely connected to the Thorne family. Samuel Garrett's descendants and the Thorne descendants intermarried, worked together, and built their lives side by side, just as Samuel and Thomas had been partners and friends. The church in Santa Rosa where Thomas and Priscilla had married eventually needed repairs, and the Thorne family funded the restoration. The cemetery where Jeremiah Everly had been buried, where Priscilla had prayed that desperate prayer, was carefully maintained by family members who understood the significance of that ground. As the 19th century gave way to the 20th, as the frontier gradually became settled and civilized, the Thorne family adapted and grew. They diversified beyond cattle, adding horses and crops. They built schools and supported churches. They sent their children to universities and welcomed them back to continue the family tradition. But through all the changes, through all the modernization and progress, the core values remained the same: faith, hard work, family, and love. The values that Thomas and Priscilla had lived by and passed down to their children. In the end, their story was not just about two people falling in love. It was about the power of compassion, the importance of being present when someone needs help, and the miraculous things that can happen when two people commit to building a life together through good times and bad. It was about a woman who had the courage to pray even when she had lost everything, and a man who had the wisdom to recognize a divine appointment when he saw one. It was about how a single moment of kindness can ripple forward through generations, creating waves of blessing that extend far beyond what the original actors could have imagined. The land that had once seemed so harsh and unforgiving had been transformed by their labor and love into something beautiful and productive. The barren season of Priscilla's life had given way to abundance beyond measure. The lonely cowboy had found not just a wife but a partner, a love that had sustained him through decades of life. Their story proved that the old saying was true: it is always darkest before the dawn. Priscilla's darkest moment, kneeling in the frozen dirt beside her father's grave, had come just before the dawn of the most beautiful chapter of her life. Thomas's intervention had been the first light of that new day. And so the story ended as all good love stories should, with a legacy of love that continued long after the original lovers had gone, with children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried forward the best of what they had been taught, with a ranch that stood as a monument to what can be built when two people work together in love and faith. The Wild West eventually faded into history, but the values it had forged in people like Thomas and Priscilla remained relevant and important. Hard work, self-reliance, loyalty, courage, and above all, love, these things never went out of style. And somewhere in New Mexico, on a ranch that still bore the Thorne name, descendants of that desperate woman and that kind cowboy continued to live and work and love, carrying forward a legacy that had begun with a prayer in the cold and three simple words: "Let me answer." It was a legacy worth preserving, a story worth telling, and a love worth remembering. Thomas and Priscilla Thorne had lived well, loved deeply, and left the world better than they had found it. What more could anyone ask of a life? Their story was complete, their ending happy, their legacy secure. From desperation to hope, from loneliness to love, from nothing to abundance, they had traveled the full journey together, hand in hand, heart to heart, building something that would last forever. And in the end, that was the true answer to Priscilla's desperate prayer that cold December day. Not just a job or shelter or security, though Thomas had provided all of those things. The real answer had been love, deep, abiding, transformative love that had the power to heal old wounds, create new beginnings, and build a legacy that would endure through generations. It was the kind of love that starts with simple kindness, grows through shared trials, and matures into something unbreakable. The kind of love that makes everything worthwhile, that gives meaning to the struggles and purpose to the victories. The kind of love that, once found, becomes the foundation upon which everything else is built. Thomas had indeed answered Priscilla's prayers, but in doing so, she had answered his as well. He had been searching for meaning, for purpose, for someone to share his life with. She had given him all of that and more. They had saved each other, healed each other, completed each other, and that, more than anything else, was why their story continued to resonate through the generations. Because it was not just a story about two people falling in love in the Wild West. It was a story about hope in hopelessness, about finding light in darkness, about the transformative power of compassion and love. It was a story that reminded people that even in their darkest moments, even when they are alone and afraid and praying desperately for help, an answer might be just around the corner. It might come in the form of a kind stranger who kneels beside you and says, "Let me answer." And sometimes, just sometimes, that answer changes everything.